Welcome to Ancient Relics Keeper. Uncover the hidden secrets of history, from ancient mysteries to lost civilizations. Join us on this thrilling journey. Subscribe and dive into the unknown. In the heart of Ireland, nestled in the lush green landscape of the Boyne Valley, lies a structure that defies time. It's a massive, circular mound of earth and stone, adorned with mysterious spiral carvings. This is Newgrange. Built over 5,000 years ago, it is older than the Great Pyramids of Giza, older even than Stonehenge. For centuries, it was considered a tomb for ancient Irish kings. But what if it's something more? A controversial theory by a modern scientist suggests this is not just an ancient tomb. He claims it is the central temple of the most legendary lost civilization of all, Atlantis. Could this ancient Irish marvel be the true location of Plato's famous lost city? Today, we investigate the science, the legend, and the DNA to ask a radical question. Is Newgrange the gateway to Ireland's lost Atlantis? Before we can even begin to entertain the sensational possibility that we are standing at the heart of a legendary lost empire, we must first ground ourselves in the known reality of Newgrange. We must strip away the layers of myth and speculation and meet this monument on its own terms. To truly appreciate the scale of the mystery, we have to understand the scale of the achievement itself. So, let's open the case file on this Neolithic masterpiece and examine the hard, cold, and utterly astonishing facts. What is Newgrange, really? The answer begins not with a legend, but with a clock, the grand clock of human history. Our first fact file entry concerns its staggering age and scale. In our modern minds, ancient history is often dominated by two iconic structures: the Great Pyramids of Giza and Stonehenge. They are the yardsticks by which we measure antiquity. But Newgrange shatters those yardsticks. Archaeological dating has placed its construction at around 3200 BC. Let that date sink in for a moment. This means Newgrange was already standing, complete and operational, for at least 500 years before the first stones of the Great Pyramid were laid in Egypt. It predates the famous Circle of Stonehenge by a similar margin. It was built during the Neolithic period or the New Stone Age, a time we often mistakenly associate with primitive people living simple lives in mud huts. Yet here, in the lush green fields of Ireland, a society we know so little about was undertaking an engineering project of breathtaking ambition and permanence. They were not just building a structure, they were building a man-made mountain. The Great Mound of Newgrange is colossal. It covers over an acre of land, a sprawling, circular footprint that dominates the surrounding landscape. From one side to the other, it measures roughly 85 meters, or about 280 feet in diameter. It is composed of an estimated 200,000 tons of rock, earth, and stone. To put that weight into perspective, it's the equivalent of about 35,000 adult elephants stacked together. And this wasn't just a simple case of piling up local dirt. The builders of Newgrange were discerning engineers and geologists. The vast majority of the smaller stones that make up the mound's core, known as the cairn, were gathered from the nearby River Boyne, a task that would have involved dredging and transporting thousands of tons of material, basket by basket. But the most impressive stones are the ones that form its structure and facade. The mound is surrounded by 97 massive curbstones, some weighing several tons apiece, laid end-to-end to form a containing ring. The brilliant white quartz stones that are believed to have once covered its front-facing wall, making it gleam like a beacon in the sun, were sourced from the Wicklow Mountains, a staggering 80 kilometers or 50 miles to the south. The darker, rounded granite cobbles interspersed with the quartz came from the Mourne Mountains, an equally impressive distance to the north. This was not a local community project. This was a massive regional undertaking, requiring a highly organized society capable of quarrying, transporting, and assembling materials from across a wide swath of the island. They did this without the wheel, without metal tools harder than copper or bronze, and without beasts of burden like horses or oxen. They did it with human muscle, with log rollers, with rafts, and with a level of social cooperation and planning that is simply mind-boggling for a Stone Age culture. The sheer scale and logistical complexity of Newgrange is the first piece of evidence that we are not dealing with an ordinary ancient tomb, but with something far more significant. This brings us to our second fact file, the structure itself. From a distance, Newgrange may look like a simple, grass-covered hill, but that is a deception of time. Beneath that green skin lies a marvel of Neolithic engineering. Officially, archaeologists classify Newgrange as a passage tomb, a term that, while technically accurate, feels woefully inadequate. It implies its only function was as a burial place, a sort of elaborate stone coffin. But to call Newgrange just a tomb is like calling a grand cathedral just a building. It misses the point entirely. To truly understand it, you must enter it. A low, narrow entrance, guarded by a famously carved stone, leads into the heart of the mound. You must bow your head to pass through, a forced act of humility before entering this sacred space. This leads you into a 19-meter-long passage, just under 63 feet. The passage is claustrophobic, lined with massive, upright stone slabs, called orthostats, that support a roof of heavy capstones. The air grows cooler, the sounds of the outside world fade away, and you are journeying into the earth, into the past itself. The passage climbs gently upwards as you move deeper inside, a subtle but brilliant piece of engineering design with a very specific purpose we will come to later. At the end of this long, dark journey, the passage opens dramatically into a central chamber. The chamber is not a simple room. It has a distinctive, cross-shaped layout, known as a cruciform shape, with 3 smaller recesses, or side chambers, branching off the main area. The roof of this central chamber soars upwards to a height of about 6 meters, or 20 feet, using a technique called corbelling. This is where the builders laid massive, flat stones one on top of the other, with each successive layer projecting slightly inwards, until the final gap at the top could be closed with a single capstone. This technique creates a stable, beehive-shaped dome that has successfully supported the immense weight of the thousands of tons of rock above it for over 5 millennia. But perhaps the most astounding engineering feat of Newgrange is not what you see, but what you don't feel. The interior of the central chamber is, and has always been, completely dry. Despite being located in Ireland, a country famous for its abundant rainfall, and despite being buried under a mountain of porous earth and stone, the builders devised a system so effective that not a single drop of water has ever penetrated the inner sanctum. They achieved this by carefully selecting and tilting the massive capstones on the roof, and by carving grooves into their surfaces to channel any penetrating water away from the passage and out of the mound. This demonstrates a sophisticated, practical understanding of hydrology and construction that is simply phenomenal. This was not a primitive shelter. This was a perfectly sealed, timeless inner world, designed by master builders to last for eternity. As you stand in the quiet darkness of that central chamber, your eyes adjust and you begin to notice the third critical element of Newgrange's identity: its enigmatic and beautiful art. Newgrange is not just a work of engineering. It is one of the world's largest and most important galleries of megalithic art. The stones are not silent. They are covered in messages, carved into their surfaces thousands of years ago. All throughout the passage and chambers, the surfaces of the great stones are decorated with abstract patterns. Zigzags, chevrons, diamond shapes known as lozenges, and most famously, hypnotic, swirling spirals. The artistry is most spectacular on the outside. Of the 97 giant curbstones that ring the base of the mound, many are intricately decorated. But none is more famous than Curbstone 1, the monumental stone that guards the main entrance. It is a masterpiece, a flowing tapestry of spirals, lozenges, and other geometric forms. At its very center is the iconic symbol of Newgrange, the triskele, a triple spiral of 3 interconnected, swirling lines. This symbol is repeated inside the tomb as well, in the most sacred space of the central chamber. But what does it all mean? This is one of the deepest parts of the Newgrange mystery, because the artists left no key to decipher their work. The symbols are abstract, their meaning lost to the chasm of time. Scholars and mystics have debated their significance for centuries. Do the spirals represent the sun's journey, or perhaps the flow of water in the nearby River Boyne? Could they be maps of the cosmos, or maps of the local landscape itself? A popular and compelling interpretation is that the triple spiral represents one of the oldest concepts in human spirituality: the eternal cycle of life, death, and rebirth. It could also represent the land, sea, and sky, or perhaps the past, present, and future. The ambiguity is part of its power. The art of Newgrange speaks to us not in a clear language of words, but in a universal language of symbol and pattern, inviting us to contemplate the great cycles of existence. It proves these were not just builders. They were artists and thinkers, grappling with the same profound questions that we do today. This brings us to our final and most magical fact file entry. It is the feature that elevates Newgrange from an impressive structure to a living, breathing instrument of stone and light. We're talking about the great astronomical alignment. This is where all the elements we've discussed, the scale, the structure, the art, come together for one singular, breathtaking purpose. High above the main entrance, integrated seamlessly into the structure, is a small rectangular opening. For centuries, this opening, known as the roof box, was a complete mystery. Its purpose was forgotten, and it was seen as just another strange feature of the ancient building. Then, in the 1960s, Professor Michael J. O'Kelly, who led the modern excavation and restoration of Newgrange, made a discovery that would change our understanding of the site forever. Based on local legends and a hunch, he decided to be inside the tomb at dawn on December 21st, the winter solstice, the shortest day of the year. As the sun began to rise over the distant horizon, a single, brilliant beam of golden light pierced the darkness of the tomb. It shone directly through the roof box, passed over the entrance stone below, and traveled the entire 19-meter length of the narrow passage. For about 17 minutes, that sliver of sunlight crept across the floor of the central chamber, illuminating the ancient carvings and filling the sacred space with an ethereal glow. Then, as quickly as it came, it was gone, plunging the chamber back into total darkness for another year. This was not an accident. This was a deliberate, precisely calculated act of astronomical engineering. The builders of Newgrange had perfectly aligned their massive structure to capture the first rays of the winter solstice sun. The slight upward slope of the passage floor that we noted earlier was designed to ensure the beam of light would stay at floor level as it traveled inwards. The roof box was their window to the cosmos. This stunning annual event reveals the true genius of its creators. They were not just farmers and builders, they were brilliant astronomers. They possessed a deep, sophisticated knowledge of the sun's cycles and had the mathematical and engineering skill to build a 200,000-ton instrument to celebrate it. The winter solstice was a profoundly important time for ancient agricultural societies. It marked the death of the old year and the turning point when the days would begin to grow longer, promising the return of light, warmth, and life. The illumination of Newgrange was likely a powerful, dramatic ritual, a moment of communal celebration and spiritual rebirth. The sun was literally entering the womb of the earth to plant the seed of the new year. So, when we look at all the evidence together, its immense age and scale, its perfectly engineered structure, its mysterious art, and its breathtaking astronomical alignment, the case file on Newgrange is clear. This was not just a tomb. This was a cathedral to the sun, a center for ritual, a masterpiece of art, and a monument of immense social and spiritual power. It is the work of a lost civilization that was far more advanced and sophisticated than we ever thought possible. And it is this very sophistication, this almost unbelievable level of achievement 5,000 years ago, that makes the radical theory we are about to explore, the theory of Atlantis, so incredibly tempting. Newgrange itself sets the stage for one of history's greatest mysteries. We have established the undeniable wonder of Newgrange. It is a monument that, by itself, represents one of the greatest achievements of the ancient world. For decades, the story largely ended there. Newgrange was a masterpiece of a mysterious Neolithic Irish culture, a testament to their brilliance and nothing more. But in the world of ancient mysteries, established facts are often just the launching pad for radical new ideas. And in the early 21st century, a new and explosive theory was thrown into the conversation. A theory that sought to connect Ireland's greatest ancient wonder with the world's most enduring legend of a lost civilization. This is where we build the case for a truly mind-bending proposition, that Newgrange was the sacred heart of the lost city of Atlantis. To begin, we must introduce the central figure behind this audacious claim. Our story's protagonist is not an archaeologist or a historian, but a Swedish geographer named Dr. Ulf Erlingsson. This is a crucial detail. Erlingsson approached the Atlantis mystery not with a trowel and brush, but with maps, satellite imagery, and a deep understanding of geology and landscape formation. In 2004, he published a book with a bold title, Atlantis from a Geographer's Perspective. His core argument was simple but revolutionary. For centuries, everyone looking for Atlantis had been making a fundamental mistake. They were searching for a city, an archaeological site, when they should have been looking for a landscape. He believed that the key to finding Atlantis wasn't buried in the ground, but was hiding in plain sight, in the very text that started it all. This brings us to the second step in building this case. We must go back to the source, to the original blueprint for Atlantis. The entire legend comes from just one source, the writings of the ancient Greek philosopher Plato, specifically in his two dialogues, the Timaeus and the Critias, written around 360 BC. Everything we think we know about Atlantis, its powerful navy, its advanced civilization, its catastrophic destruction, originates here. According to Plato, the story was passed down to him from the Athenian statesman Solon, who in turn heard it from Egyptian priests in the city of Sais. These priests claimed their temple records told the tale of a great island empire that existed 9,000 years before their time. Plato provides a surprisingly detailed geographic description of this lost land. This is the blueprint that Erlingsson decided to take literally, as a geographer would. Let's examine the key specifications. First, its location. Plato states clearly that Atlantis was an island situated in the Atlantic Ocean, in front of the mouth of the Pillars of Heracles. The Pillars of Heracles is the ancient name for the Strait of Gibraltar, the narrow channel that connects the Mediterranean Sea to the vast Atlantic. So, the location is an island somewhere out in the Atlantic. Second, its size and topography. Plato describes the main island of Atlantis as being larger than Libya and Asia combined. This is often seen as a major stumbling block, as it implies a continent-sized landmass. However, Libya and Asia to the ancient Greeks referred to North Africa and modern-day Turkey, not the entire continents we know today. Still, it was a very large island. More specifically, Plato describes the capital city as being situated on a large, flat, and extremely fertile plain, which was rectangular in shape. This plain was, in turn, surrounded on three sides by mountains that rose sheer from the sea, protecting it from the cold north winds. Third, the structure of the city itself. The capital city of Atlantis was described as having a unique and remarkable design. At its very center was a hill, upon which stood the main temple dedicated to the sea god Poseidon. This central hill was surrounded by concentric rings of land and water, 3 of water, 2 of land, which were supposedly created by Poseidon himself. It was, in essence, a giant bullseye of alternating canals and land masses. For centuries, treasure hunters and scholars have used this blueprint to search for Atlantis everywhere from the Mediterranean island of Santorini to the Caribbean and even Antarctica. Every search has come up empty, leading most mainstream academics to conclude that Atlantis was nothing more than a philosophical fable invented by Plato to make a point about the ideal state. But Dr. Erlingson looked at this blueprint and believed everyone had missed the obvious. He proposed that the blueprint didn't point to some sunken, mythical land, but to a very real and very famous island that perfectly matched Plato's description. This leads us to the third and most crucial step of the argument: the geographic match. This is the heart of Erlingson's theory, his eureka moment. He laid Plato's ancient description over a modern map of Europe and found what he believed was a near-perfect fit: Ireland. Let's break down the parallels. First, the location. Ireland is a large island situated squarely in the Atlantic Ocean, directly out from the Pillars of Heracles. Its position fits the description perfectly. Second, the topography. This is where the theory becomes truly compelling. Ireland possesses a unique and distinctive geography. It has a massive central lowland, a vast, flat, and famously fertile plain. This plain is, just as Plato described, surrounded on nearly all sides by coastal mountains and hills. These mountains effectively shelter the central plain from the harsh Atlantic winds. Erlingson argues that Plato's description of a large, oblong plain surrounded by mountains is a textbook geographical description of Ireland. But what about the concentric rings? This is where a geographer's eye becomes critical. Erlingson argues that Plato's description of rings of land and water was not a description of a man-made city, but a description of the island's natural geology, perhaps misunderstood or mythologized over time. Ireland's central plain is primarily composed of limestone, a relatively soft rock. The surrounding coastal mountains are made of harder, older rocks, like sandstone and granite. This geological makeup creates a natural, large-scale concentric paterna soft center surrounded by a hard outer ring. Erlingson even points to Ireland's many circular lakes, known as loughs, and its bogs and river systems, suggesting that these could be the rings of water that Plato's source was trying to describe. The description of Atlantis, he argues, is not the description of a city, but a surprisingly accurate geographical profile of the island of Ireland itself. If all of this is true, if the geography, topography, and location all point to Ireland, then the final step of the argument falls into place almost by itself. If Ireland is Atlantis, then where is its capital, its sacred center? You would have to look for the most significant, most impressive, and most sacred monumental site from the period when this civilization would have flourished. And in Ireland, the answer is overwhelming and singular: the Brú na Bóin archaeological landscape with its crown jewel, Newgrange. This is the stunning conclusion of Erlingson's case. He proposes that the grand, circular mound of Newgrange, with its intricate art and astronomical alignment, is nothing less than the central temple of Atlantis described by Plato. The temple that stood on the central hill, dedicated to the gods. The Boyne Valley, with its unprecedented concentration of massive monuments, was the capital district. The circular shape of Newgrange itself, Erlingson suggests, could be a microversion of the larger concentric pattern of the Islanda temple built in the image of the land it represents. Suddenly, the incredible sophistication of Newgrange, which we've already established, is no longer a historical anomaly. It's exactly what you would expect to find at the heart of a legendary, advanced civilization. Its age, around 3200 BC, while not matching Plato's timeline exactly, places it in a period of incredible cultural achievement. The theory provides a name and a legendary context for the unknown geniuses who built this wonder. It takes the isolated mystery of Newgrange and places it at the center of the world's greatest legend. Of course, this is a radical departure from mainstream archaeology. It's a theory built on geographic interpretation, not on a direct artifactual link. There are no stones at Newgrange inscribed with the word Atlantis. But as a circumstantial case, it is undeniably intriguing. It presents a cohesive and logical argument that starts with Plato's own words and ends at the entrance to Ireland's most sacred ancient site. It reframes the entire question. The mystery is no longer where did Atlantis sink, but rather has it been sitting there, hiding in plain sight all along? The case has been made. The proposal is on the table. And now, with this framework in mind, we must turn to the hard science and see if the supporting evidence can hold up the weight of such a spectacular claim. Presenting a grand theory based on geography and ancient texts is one thing. Finding concrete, scientific evidence to support it is another challenge entirely. The proposal that Ireland is Atlantis and Newgrange is its temple is, without a doubt, one of the most audacious claims in modern archaeology. On its face, it seems like a stretch, a fascinating but ultimately fanciful idea. But the story doesn't end with Dr. Erlingson's maps. In the years since he published his theory, new discoveries, particularly in the world of genetics and a deeper analysis of the culture, have unearthed some startling pieces of evidence. These findings don't prove the theory outright, but they do add layers of unexpected and deeply intriguing support. To evaluate the true strength of this claim, we must now act as detectives, asking critical questions and following the scientific clues wherever they lead. Our first and most groundbreaking line of inquiry takes us into the very building blocks of life itself. We must ask, does the DNA of the Newgrange builders tell a story that aligns with the legend of Atlantis? For a long time, the origins of the Irish people were shrouded in myth. But recently, revolutionary advances in the analysis of ancient DNA have allowed scientists to read the genetic history book locked within ancient bones. In 2015, a team of geneticists from Trinity College Dublin and Queen's University Belfast published a landmark study. They sequenced the first full genomes from ancient Irish humans, including the remains of a woman who was a Neolithic farmer from 5,200 years ago, and, most importantly, the remains of several men buried within the megalithic tombs of the Boyne Valley, including Newgrange itself. The first major revelation was that the people who built Newgrange were not native to Ireland. Their genetic signature was completely different from the earlier Mesolithic hunter-gatherers who had inhabited the island for thousands of years. Their DNA traced a clear path of migration. Their ancestors had journeyed from the Fertile Crescent in the Middle East, the cradle of agriculture, and swept across Europe over generations, bringing farming, pottery, and a new way of life with them. They were, in essence, colonists. They arrived on the shores of Ireland and created a new and dominant culture, the one responsible for these incredible megalithic structures. This already paints a picture of a dynamic, migratory people, not a simple, isolated tribe. But the most shocking discovery came from the remains of one man, an adult male who had been laid to rest in the most sacred part of Newgrange, the central chamber. When scientists analyzed his genome, they found something that made them check their results again and again. The man was the product of a first-degree incestuous union. This means his parents were either a brother and a sister, or a father and a daughter. In most human societies, past and present, incest is a powerful and almost universal taboo. So to find it in such a high-status burial is not just surprising. It's a profound statement. This wasn't a random event. It suggests a ruling dynasty so obsessed with maintaining the purity of its bloodline that it was willing to break the most fundamental of social rules. The only parallels we see for this kind of behavior are in specific, highly stratified societies ruled by elites who believed they were descended from the gods. The most famous examples are the pharaohs of ancient Egypt, who frequently married their siblings to keep the divine royal bloodline undiluted. And here, in the heart of Neolithic Ireland, was a man whose very existence pointed to a similar belief system, a society ruled by a small, elite group of god-kings. Now, let's connect this stunning scientific fact back to our Atlantis theory. How did Plato describe the rulership of Atlantis? He stated that the island was divided among the 10 sons of the sea god Poseidon and a mortal woman named Cleito. These 10 sons became the first 10 kings of Atlantis. They were a divine royal family, a dynasty that ruled from the very beginning. The discovery of a god-king, buried at the heart of what Erlingson proposes is Atlantis' central temple, is an astonishing echo of Plato's story. It is a piece of hard scientific data that, completely unexpectedly, aligns with a key detail of the legend. It doesn't prove that this man was a king of Atlantis, but it proves that the society that built Newgrange had a social structure far more extreme and hierarchical than previously imagined, one that bears a striking resemblance to the divine royalty described in the myth. This genetic evidence encourages us to ask our second investigative question. Beyond its rulers, does the broader culture of the Newgrange builders match Plato's description of the Atlanteans? Plato didn't just describe the geography of Atlantis. He described its people. He portrayed them as being highly sophisticated, particularly in 3 key areas: engineering, astronomy, and seamanship. Let's look at the evidence. Were the builders of Newgrange master engineers? The answer is an unequivocal yes. As we've already established, creating a 200,000-ton, waterproof structure that has remained stable for over 5,000 years, using only stone, earth, and human labor, is an engineering feat of the highest order. It required sophisticated planning, project management, and a deep, intuitive understanding of physics and hydrology. On this point, the Newgrange culture perfectly matches the description of the Atlanteans. Were they master astronomers? Again, the answer is a resounding yes. The winter solstice alignment is not a happy accident. It is a work of breathtaking precision. To calculate and execute this alignment required years, if not decades, of careful solar observation. It required the ability to mark positions, make precise calculations, and then translate that astronomical data into a massive architectural plan. The builders of Newgrange were undeniably masters of the cosmos. This, too, aligns perfectly with the idea of an advanced, learned civilization. Finally, were they master mariners? This is a logical inference. The DNA tells us they arrived in Ireland as part of a great migration. They didn't walk there. Ireland has been an island for over 10,000 years. They had to have crossed the sea, likely the often treacherous Irish Sea, in boats capable of carrying people, livestock, and supplies. Furthermore, the stones used to build Newgrange quartz from Wicklow and the granite from Mournware sourced from coastal locations and were almost certainly transported at least part of the way by water, on rafts or barges along the coast and up the River Boyne. For an island people, skill in seamanship was not a luxury. It was a necessity for survival, trade, and for the construction of their most sacred monuments. So, when you look at the profile of the Newgrange Culturia society of brilliant engineers, precise astronomers, and capable seafarers, ruled by a divine right dynasty, it aligns remarkably well with the description of the legendary Atlanteans. The culture is a match. The DNA is a match. The geography is a match. But any good detective knows you must also address the evidence that doesn't fit. This leads us to our third and most difficult question. What about the timeline? This is, without a doubt, the single biggest obstacle for the Ireland as Atlantis theory. Plato is very specific about the timing. The Egyptian priests told Solon that Atlantis was destroyed 9,000 years before their time. Solon lived around 600 BC, which places the destruction of Atlantis at approximately 9600 BC. This is the end of the last ice age. Newgrange, however, was built around 3200 BC. That's a discrepancy of more than 6,000 years. This isn't a small gap. It's a historical chasm. How can the theory possibly account for this? Proponents of the theory offer a clever, though speculative, explanation. They suggest a simple but profound translation error. The story of Atlantis, as told to Solon, was originally recorded in Egyptian hieroglyphs. The Egyptian numerical system was decimal, like ours, but it used distinct symbols for 1, 10, 100, and 1000. The theory posits that when the Egyptian priests were translating their ancient records for the Greek visitor Solon, or perhaps when Solon was later relaying the story, a crucial mistake was made. The symbol for 100 was misread as the symbol for 1000. If this were the case, the entire timeline would have been inflated by a factor of 10. Let's do the math. If the destruction occurred 900 years before Solon's time instead of 9000, that would place the event around 1500 BC. This is the time of the Bronze Age collapse, a period of immense upheaval across Europe and the Near East, a very plausible time for a civilization to fall. And the age of the Atlantean civilization itself would be brought forward into the Neolithic and Bronze Ages, the exact period when Newgrange and the other great megalithic sites of Atlantic Europe were being built and used. This decimal point error theory is impossible to prove, but it is a plausible mechanism that would resolve the biggest contradiction in the entire mystery. It suggests that Plato was reporting a real history, but one that had been distorted by a simple ancient clerical error. This correction of the timeline helps us address our fourth and final question. If Ireland is Atlantis, how did it sink? The image of Atlantis disappearing beneath the waves in a single day and night of fire and earthquakes is the most famous part of the legend. Ireland, quite obviously, is still very much above water. So how can this be reconciled? If we accept the corrected timeline, the sinking doesn't have to be a literal geological event. The collapse of the powerful Neolithic and Bronze Age cultures around 1500 BC was so sudden and so complete that it could easily be remembered as a metaphorical sinking. The society that had the power and knowledge to build Newgrange vanished. Their culture, their power, their entire world, it all disappeared from history. A civilization sinking into oblivion and obscurity is a powerful metaphor that could easily have been literalized over centuries of oral retelling. However, there is another, even more intriguing possibility. What if the story of the sinking wasn't a metaphor, but a distorted collective memory of a very real geological catastrophe? We don't have to look to Ireland itself for this event. Around 6200 BC, a massive underwater landslide off the coast of Norway, known as the Storegga Slide, triggered a mega tsunami that devastated coastlines all across the North Atlantic. This event would have been unimaginably catastrophic for any coastal communities. But even more significant was the flooding of Doggerland. During the Ice Age, sea levels were much lower, and a vast plain of land connected what is now Great Britain to mainland Europe. As the ice melted and sea levels rose, this land was slowly, and at times catastrophically, inundated. The final sinking of Doggerland would have been a world-ending event for the thousands of people who lived there. A real-life story of a homeland disappearing beneath the waves. It is entirely plausible that the memory of this real sinking became a central part of the mythology of all the peoples of Atlantic Europe. This traumatic, ancestral memory could have later been conflated with the story of the great Irish civilization, merging the tale of a cultural collapse with the older tale of a literal land sinking beneath the sea. When we assemble all these pieces of evidence, the case becomes surprisingly robust. The DNA evidence pointing to a god-king dynasty, the cultural match of master engineers and astronomers, the plausible explanation for the timeline discrepancy, and the potential origins of the sinking myth, they all weave together. None of these points is a smoking gun on its own, but together, they form a compelling body of circumstantial evidence. They transform the Atlantis and Ireland theory from a wild guess into a structured hypothesis, one that challenges us to reconsider the very foundations of European prehistory. The investigation shows that while the legend may seem fantastic, it is echoed by some of the most recent and exciting discoveries of modern science. We have journeyed from the green hills of Ireland to the ancient texts of Greece. We have peered into the heart of a 5,000-year-old tomb and into the very DNA of its creators. We have presented a radical case that this Neolithic masterpiece is the sacred center of Plato's lost Atlantis. We've examined the geographical clues, the scientific data, and the potential explanations for the theory's greatest weaknesses. Now, the time has come to step back and weigh the evidence. We must convene a final hearing in the court of historical inquiry. What is the verdict on Newgrange? Is it a true remnant of Atlantis, a purely Irish wonder that has been co-opted by a myth? Or does the truth lie somewhere in the mysterious space between? First, we must hear from the prosecution, which in this case is the voice of mainstream academic consensus. For the vast majority of archaeologists, historians, and Plato scholars, the theory linking Newgrange to Atlantis is compelling folklore, but it is not history. Their argument is built on a simple and powerful principle. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. And in their view, the evidence for the Atlantis connection simply isn't there. The primary objection is the complete lack of any direct, unambiguous link. Despite decades of meticulous excavation at Newgrange and other sites in the Boyne Valley, archaeologists have never found a single artifact that can be definitively tied to Plato's story. There are no inscriptions in a Proto-Greek language, no pottery styles that match those of the Aegean, no mention of Poseidon or the other gods of the Greek pantheon. The art of Newgrange, with its abstract spirals and chevrons, is magnificent, but it belongs to a well-documented artistic tradition that stretches across Neolithic Atlantic Europe. It does not contain the bulls, triremes, or other specific imagery one might expect from the civilization Plato described. Skeptics argue that the case built by Dr. Erlingson and his supporters is a classic example of cherry-picking evidence. It involves selecting only the data that fits the theory while ignoring the vast amount of data that doesn't. They see the geographical similarities between Ireland and Plato's description as vague and open to interpretation. Many places on Earth have a central plain surrounded by mountains. The concentric rings argument is seen as a clever but ultimately unprovable reinterpretation of the geology. To the academic world, Plato's text is clear. He described a city with literal man-made rings of water and land, not a natural geological formation. Furthermore, they argue that there is no need to invoke a legendary civilization like Atlantis to explain Newgrange. To do so, they contend, is actually a disservice to the real people who built it. The Neolithic culture of Ireland was, in its own right, a remarkable and sophisticated society. Their achievements in engineering, art, and astronomy were their own. They don't need to be validated by a Greek myth. Attributing their masterpiece to Atlanteans risks diminishing the accomplishments of the indigenous Irish culture, framing them as mere inheritors rather than brilliant innovators. The academic verdict, therefore, is firm. Newgrange is a breathtakingly complex passage tomb, a testament to the genius of a specific Neolithic people. The Atlantis connection is a fascinating intellectual exercise, but one that belongs in the realm of fiction, not fact. Now, we must hear the argument for the defense. This is the voice of the believers, the independent researchers, and the curious minds who refuse to dismiss the parallels as mere coincidence. Their case rests on the power of circumstantial evidence and the idea that sometimes the absence of evidence is not evidence of absence, especially when dealing with the remote past. The defenders of the theory argue that the geographical match presented by Erlingsson is far too specific to be easily dismissed. It's not just any island with mountains. It's the combination of its precise location in the Atlantic, its size, the specific oblong shape of its central plain, and its protective ring of mountains. The totality of these features, they argue, makes Ireland a unique candidate, one that fits Plato's blueprint far better than any other proposed location. But the cornerstone of their modern argument is the startling DNA evidence. The discovery of an elite individual buried at Newgrange, who was the product of first-degree incest, is a bombshell. It provides an unexpected and powerful echo of Plato's description of a divine ruling family. Skeptics may call it a coincidence, but what are the odds of finding such a specific and unusual social practice, one associated with god-king ideologies, at the very site proposed as the center of a legendary empire ruled by god-kings? To believers, this is as close to a smoking gun as one could ever hope to find from a 5,000-year-old burial. It suggests that the society at Newgrange had a social structure that was not just sophisticated, but was of the exact kind described in the Atlantis legend. They also argue that the academic dismissal of the theory is too rigid. The demand for a Greek inscription at a site that predates classical Greece by thousands of years is an unreasonable standard of proof. The story, as Plato tells it, was passed from Egyptian records to a Greek statesman, who then passed it down through his family. It would have been translated, interpreted, and likely distorted multiple times. To expect a perfect one-to-one match is to misunderstand how history and legend are transmitted. The core elements, the location, the landscape, the advanced culture, the divine rulers are what matter, and on these points the theory holds strong. The defense rests its case not on a single piece of irrefutable proof, but on the cumulative weight of all these converging lines of evidence, which together paint a picture that is too compelling to ignore. Faced with these two powerful, opposing arguments, it's possible that we are trapped in a false dichotomy. Perhaps the verdict is not a simple guilty or not guilty. This leads us to a third possibility, a middle ground that might hold the key to a more nuanced truth. What if the question we've been asking, is Ireland Atlantis, is the wrong question? Let's consider an alternative hypothesis. What if Atlantis was not a single specific place, but was Plato's name for a forgotten chapter of human history, the great megalithic age of Atlantic Europe? In this view, Plato's story is a fragmented, mythologized memory of this entire lost world. It wasn't one empire, but a shared cultural sphere, the story of a powerful island beyond the Pillars of Heracles, could be a composite memory of all these seafaring peoples. The description of its capital could have been based on a garbled account of the most impressive of all these sites, the sacred complex in the Boyne Valley. The story of its destruction could be a memory of the cultural collapse that swept through this entire region during the Bronze Age, when the great age of megalithic building came to an end. This middle ground theory is elegant because it resolves many of the contradictions. It explains why Newgrange is so advanced without needing it to be a literal Greek colony. Newgrange is not the temple of Atlantis. It is the temple of a real lost civilization that inspired the legend of Atlantis. The legend becomes a distorted echo of a genuine, powerful, and mysterious period in European prehistory that was largely forgotten by the time of the classical Greeks. It allows us to appreciate the genius of the Neolithic Irish people on their own terms, while also acknowledging that their world may have been the historical seed for the world's most enduring myth. This brings us to our final conclusion, the enduring legacy of this entire investigation. Ultimately, whether you believe Newgrange is the literal center of Atlantis, a purely Irish wonder, or the inspiration for a legend, the debate itself forces us to look at this ancient monument with new eyes and a renewed sense of awe. The quest to connect it with Atlantis illuminates the profound truth that was there all along. The people who built Newgrange were the inhabitants of a real lost world. They were a civilization with a deep understanding of the cosmos, with engineering skills that rivaled the Egyptians, and with a social and spiritual life of incredible complexity. They rose, they flourished, and they vanished, leaving behind a riddle of stone and light. The fact that their achievements were so great that we are even tempted to attribute them to a mythical supercivilization is, in itself, the highest form of praise. It is a testament to how far they pushed the boundaries of human potential in their time. Newgrange doesn't need the myth of Atlantis to be wondrous. Its wonder is inherent in its age, its precision, and its silent, enduring beauty. It stands as a powerful rebuke to our modern arrogance, the idea that we are the pinnacle of human achievement. It proves that 5,000 years ago, people we might dismiss as primitive were capable of creating something that can still, to this day, fill us with a profound sense of wonder and touch our very souls. The verdict, then, is not about Atlantis. The verdict is about Newgrange itself. It is a certified masterpiece of a lost civilization. The Atlantis theory serves as a fascinating lens, a tool that helps us focus on its true significance. It's a gateway that leads us to a deeper appreciation of the real mystery, the forgotten story of the brilliant people of Neolithic Ireland. Their world may be lost, but their legacy is written in 200,000 tons of stone, waiting for anyone willing to listen to its ancient, silent song. Newgrange remains a silent witness to a forgotten age, a masterpiece of stone and light. It stands as a monument to the genius of its builders. Is it the key to unlocking the legend of Atlantis? Or is it a uniquely Irish wonder that needs no myth to enhance its greatness? Perhaps the truth lies somewhere in between. The one certainty is that this 5,000-year-old structure continues to challenge us, reminding us that our planet is still full of lost civilizations and ancient mysteries waiting to be understood. What do you believe? Is the Atlantis connection a fascinating possibility or just a good story? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the past. Don't forget to subscribe for more explorations of our world's greatest secrets. Thanks for exploring history's mysteries with Ancient Relics Keeper. Like, subscribe, and share your thoughts below. What secret should we unravel next? Stay curious and see you soon.